During the pandemic, I got a new job, and one of the hobbies, I suppose, that has sort of emerged during that time is flame finishing titanium. Each of the pry bars that is in front of us is made of titanium or titanium alloy. AL64V, TC21, TC4, all variations on a theme basically. I sort of found myself interested in a pry bar concept when I was working construction. You might recognize this. This is just a small 1/8 inch piece of plastic that tapers down to a wedge. I was thinking between using this and basically a scraper, just like one of those Warner brand paint scrapers. I thought to myself, man, it'd be really nice to have a substantial chunk of steel that could withstand wear and tear, but also function as a pocket tool, something that was wieldy and unassuming, small enough to carry with you. And I discovered actually there is a market for this type of design, this product, and I had no idea how vast that world was. It sort of occurred to me, not only is this a useful tool, but it's something that I basically completely ignored up until recently. I didn't realize how useful they could be, and they've actually ended up saving a lot of my knives. One of the reasons I started getting into pry bars was because I found myself using pocket knives for digging into things or having to pry something open. Though there are plenty of knives that can take a beating, it's super handy to have a pry bar that is sturdy enough to withstand most everyday tasks that you would put it through using your hand. In my humble opinion, it's better to use a tool that's designed to take a beating for that and save your knife for cutting. Each of these titanium pry bars is relatively, well, they're all between basically a 3 and 5 inch length. Each of these could technically be considered, in a way, a multi-tool, even though plenty of them are designed specifically and only to function as a pry bar. This is one of my favorites by Moy Works. This is the bullhead pry, made out of TC21 titanium alloy, number 40 out of 200. So, I guess for me, it started out as just having some appreciation for the machining, the design. This is one by EOS Cases, featuring a supernova bead in Tiffany blue by Black Cross Leather of Colorado. This is one of the smaller designs, but it's made of 1/4 inch thick titanium. I love these little machined divots for grip. There's a false edge here along the bottom, but it's not sharp enough to cut or break skin, won't damage your pocket. And of course it's got a nice substantial bottle opener. Just a very well machined, nice looking tool. This was one that I flame finished to bronze, and you can see I've taken some sandpaper and done my best to smooth out some of the rougher edges. This was one that they sold as a factory second because it did have some of these cosmetic flaws. Even with a few cosmetic defects, titanium still takes a beautiful finish. This is basically the lowest heat coloring that comes out of titanium. The first shade that it turns when you heat it up is this bronze color. And really the colors come from variations in thickness of that layer that forms. If you'll imagine an oil slick, you see kind of a rainbow effect of colors there. Titanium starts out bronze and then winds up going through these sort of dark purples into dark blues, and then the blues start to brighten up a little bit as you apply more and more heat. In the hotter temperature range, you can even get these sort of golden hues to come out. The range of colors basically goes from bronze to purple to blue to bright blue to sort of this greenish hue to gold again. And then after that, once the oxide layer, that titanium oxide layer, has reached a certain thickness, it almost makes this sort of a dull gray kind of finish, almost like the original titanium itself. The colors are beautiful. Titanium naturally, when heated up, forms the oxide layer, and a lot of the flame finish that you see here has been done by hand, by myself, using a propane torch, and each piece comes out looking totally unique. The way the heat hits it, the way it absorbs the heat, any slight subtle imperfections in the surface, in the finish. But it comes out with these stunning hues, from bronze to purple, blue, green, and gold. And I've found that those that are machine tumbled, stone washed and tumbled, often the finish on those starts out a little duller anyway. Here's one that's been stone washed. You see those purples and blues barely. Once you're in natural light, they're even more vibrant. That process is so neat to participate in. I think part of my interest in it was purely in the nature of the titanium. My reason for having so many of these isn't because I use each and every one of them, it's just because I wanted the practice. So rather than buying raw titanium myself, cutting it myself, and then trying to execute a design, I relied on the handiwork of others and just applied the heat myself. If you're going to carry something that has multiple uses, you could do a lot worse than a titanium pry bar. It's generally strong enough to withstand anything you would put it through using your hands, and they possess the innate ability to produce these beautiful different colors and finishes. I know that it's possible to anodize titanium for a much cleaner, uniform finish. Here's one by Vice Anvil Tactical that has been anodized to this sort of lime green color. And it's a much more uniform finish. There are much subtler variations in the thickness of that layer across the surface of the tool, whereas when you heat it with a torch, the application of heat varies intensely, obviously, and so the effects are expressed in different, not unpredictable ways, but according to the thickness of the material and the length of time, I should say, the heat is applied. When you heat anodize something, when you flame finish something, it's really not anodizing when you're not using electricity, but when you flame finish something, you're only heating up, you're heating up the entire piece of titanium, but only the outermost layer of titanium is actually chemically changed into titanium oxide. So the color comes from the variations in thickness of a very otherwise thin layer. We're talking a few microns thick. You could basically sand this finish off and start out with raw titanium. Obviously, the titanium would have to be smoothed and polished to make it look nice, but you could get through this layer of blue or blurple. If you achieved a finish that was too dull or too thick, where the oxide layer basically goes from a rainbow color effect to just a dull gray, sort of an ashen carbon gray, you can sand that layer off and start anew, obviously with some effort required. The flame finish is not as exact, not as precise as the anodizing process, and usually that's done with a variable voltage power source in a chemical bath that is designed to pass on the current to the anode, which is what the tool that's receiving the anodization becomes the anode when it is connected to the power source. So this tool becomes anodized, and when it's exposed to that specific amount of voltage, it takes on this whatever, green color in this case, but whatever color that corresponds with the voltage. And that process happens relatively quickly. I mean, we're talking in a few fractions of a second. It goes from raw titanium to having this brilliant green color. So it's extremely interesting, the electronic or the electrical anodization process. But I've really only dabbled in the flame finishing, and that's because that's what is accessible to me, and that's what I was most intrigued by when I was initially getting into these titanium pry bars. As far as the philosophy of use goes, there's a million different reasons that you could justify having one. I'm not going to list those. I'll just say that a pocket knife does not serve or should not serve the same function as a pry bar. I have plenty of hard-use pocket knives that I would just call beater users. There are knives that I've used and loved and maybe not taken the best care of that I wouldn't mind sort of putting through the ringer. But even still, the edge geometry, the blade steel, it's only so tough. So when you have something that is significantly sturdier, I mean, we're talking obviously several times thicker than most pocket knife blades, especially on the cutting edge. You've got a sturdy tool that's capable of handling any number of different tasks in any number of different applications. Oh yeah, well I'd use this to open a box, maybe scrape a skittle off the floor, or some gunk, a label or a price tag perhaps. But beyond that, what purpose does it serve, and why would you need one in your pocket all the time? Well, that's the completely subjective part that's completely up to you to decide. I'm not interested in debating the semantics. All I can tell you is that if you have a pocket knife that you carry regularly, then you may also appreciate regularly carrying a pry bar. This is a Y-bar by CJG Designs. A slotted screw, Phillips, bottle opener, pry bar, all in this keychain-sized package. Obviously not for everybody, but if you see some practicality in it, then it may be for you. Part of the appeal to me was, like I said, when I was working construction and I was having to rely on flexible versions, basically, of a pry bar, I kind of wished, hey, it'd be really nice to have a really stout version of this that I could depend on for some hard-use kind of tasks. This is a Khopesh by Faro EDC. EDC, of course, for everyday carry. This is one that I flame finished. Basically, this is a box opener cutter tool. Comes to a point, but there's no secondary bevel, so it's not as sharp as a knife, won't cut rope or anything like that, but will certainly tear into plastic, tape, cardboard. This is just a lightweight, pocket-sized little tool. The only thing it's missing, in my opinion, is a lanyard hole somewhere here on the end. That being said, these are just hand tools. They're pocket tools. They don't solve every single problem, even if they are considered multi-tools or having multiple uses. And of course, if you enjoy the occasional root beer, you'll appreciate the bottle opener. Really, pry bars are kind of like knives in that they vary wildly in style, in design. They typically serve one or two or three purposes. There are plenty of people who are going to say, I use a knife for a million different things. Well, yeah, but they're generally all involving cutting something. So when I say that about pry bars, they're generally used for prying things or opening things. It's just a stout little piece of titanium that is pocketable and otherwise generally unassuming. These aren't threatening, they aren't sharp, most of them. This is one that I flame finished to bronze. And bronze isn't my favorite color. I don't like bronze, the material, but I love the bronze titanium. Can't really tell you why. This is one by Ammo EDC Studio, number 19, TC21. The only piece that isn't titanium is this steel bottle opener hook, bolted on. So, obviously these aren't, it ceases to be only practical when they start looking as good as this. And I think that may be where some of the criticism is drawn. The material is expensive. The machining process is expensive. The Mr. Nice Bar by Nice Guy Machine Co. This comes direct from the manufacturer in Colorado for $129 plus shipping. This is a beautiful piece of machinery made right here in the United States by one guy who is a great guy. So that's a price that I was sort of happy to pay. This is the Traveler pry bar, flame finished by yours truly. This is the Tactical and Portable Tiebreaker. This one, I believe, sells online for only $55 direct from Tactical and Portable, another USA maker. This is another one of my favorite designs. Features this super sturdy pocket clip bolted on. I even decided to flame finish one for myself. I feel like if there was one thing that I didn't have in my pocket, it was one of these. I constantly found myself wishing for something sturdy. I don't work on a construction site anymore, and I find that having and carrying a pry bar prepares me for whatever little menial tasks I end up encountering throughout the day. There's a million different ways that they could be useful to you. Whether or not you avail yourself in those circumstances, I don't honestly care, because for years, like I said, I didn't even know these existed and didn't really know what I was missing. I've simply enjoyed carrying and experimenting with the variety of styles, designs, and finishes that are possible with titanium and titanium alloy. It's a fun learning process, and it is basically just another valid means of artistic expression. I have an EDC page on Instagram where I post a lot of these titanium implements and knives that I carry. EDCD's Nuts on Instagram, my amateur photography. Photography is not at all what I'm interested in. It's more just in sharing the process that I'm sort of exploring, which is both the pry bar world and, of course, the flame finishing of titanium implements. That's kind of where I post some of the work that I'm proudest of, and I may share other tools that are for sale on that page. Otherwise, it's just been a neat hobby, sort of discovering this unique property of titanium. Thank you very much for watching. As always, enjoy your prize.